On a brutal winter night, retired Officer Daniel Hayes expected nothing but silence in his isolated cabin, until a sound shattered the storm, a sound no blizzard should ever make. A violent, frantic hammering rattled his frosted window. Then 3 deep scratches dragged across his door, and suddenly the entire cabin went still. Daniel froze. When he opened the door, the blizzard roared in, and standing in the storm was a German shepherd, shaking so hard his legs nearly buckled. Blood smeared his muzzle. Ice clung to his fur. Every breath broke in the frozen air. Daniel's heart collapsed. It was Rex, his K9 partner. The dog everyone believed died months ago during the mission Daniel still woke up screaming from. But Rex wasn't dead. He had clawed his way back through a storm no animal should survive. Daniel knelt to reach him, but Rex recoiled, eyes locked on the darkness behind him. His body stiffened. His ears shot straight up. One sharp bark, urgent, terrified. Something was out there. Something Rex had come to warn him about. And it was still moving in the storm. Daniel grabbed his coat, his flashlight, his trembling breath, and followed Rex into the blizzard. What he found next, no one was prepared for. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. A violent winter storm hammered the mountains that night, the kind that silenced everything except the scream of the wind. Inside his wooden cabin, retired Officer Daniel Hayes sat near the fireplace, sipping coffee and listening to the storm rattle the walls. His days of chasing criminals were long over, and nights like these usually passed quietly. But tonight was different. A sudden, frantic scratching sound jolted him upright. It came from a window, sharp, desperate, repeated. Daniel froze, unsure if the storm was playing tricks on him. Then it came again, louder this time, as if someone or something was begging to be let inside. Heart pounding, Daniel grabbed his flashlight and approached the frosted window. The glass was fogged over, making it impossible to see clearly. He wiped the condensation with his sleeve, expecting maybe a branch or wild animal caught in the storm. Instead, what appeared on the other side sent a shock rushing through his chest. Pressed against the window pane was a German shepherd, shivering violently, snow caked in its fur, and blood smeared across its mouth and chest. But not just any dog. Daniel's breath caught when he recognized the eyes staring back at him, pleading, exhausted, and familiar. It was Rex, his old K9 partner. Daniel's mind spun. Rex had been retired and living with another family miles away. There was no reason, no possibility, that he should be here, in the middle of a deadly blizzard. Yet here he was, paws pressed desperately against the glass, tail still, body trembling from cold and pain. Daniel didn't hesitate another second. He swung the door open, and the freezing wind slammed into him. Rex stumbled inside, collapsing to the wooden floor, his breath shallow, his legs barely holding any strength. Daniel dropped to his knees beside him, running his hand over the dog's cold, wet fur. "Rex, what happened to you?" he whispered. But Rex didn't rest. He pushed himself up, weak but determined, nudging Daniel's leg with his nose before limping toward the door again. His eyes, though tired, held an urgent message. He hadn't come here seeking shelter. He had come with purpose. Something out there needed Daniel's help. Something Rex couldn't handle alone. Daniel felt a familiar knot tighten in his chest. The storm was worsening and night was falling fast. But the one thing he had always trusted more than anything, more than instinct, more than experience, was Rex's judgment. Whatever brought Rex here was serious and deadly. Daniel grabbed his coat. The night was far from over. Daniel shut the cabin door quickly, blocking the icy wind that threatened to swallow the room. Rex stood in the center of the wooden floor, dripping melted snow, his breath sharp and uneven. Daniel moved toward the fireplace, grabbing towels and a warm blanket. But as he approached, Rex stepped back, refusing the comfort. His paws trembled on the floorboards, yet he didn't try to lie down. His ears were pinned forward, eyes fixed on Daniel with a strange mix of urgency and fear. It was as if he was trying to speak, trying to tell Daniel something without a single bark. Daniel knelt beside him, gently pressing a towel against the blood on Rex's fur. "Easy, boy, let me help you," he murmured. But Rex pulled away again, whining softly, pacing in small circles like every second mattered. This wasn't the normal injured animal restlessness. This was purposeful, deliberate. Rex kept stopping at the door, nudging it with his nose, then looking back at Daniel as if asking him to follow. The old officer felt a familiar tension return to his chest, the instinct he thought he left behind when he retired. Something was out there. Something Rex wasn't willing to ignore. Still trying to understand, Daniel checked Rex more closely. The blood wasn't his, not all of it. Some patches were too high, smeared like he had pushed his face against something or someone. Daniel's stomach tightened. "Who did you find out there?" he whispered under his breath. Rex paused when he heard Daniel's voice shift. He stepped forward and gently pressed his head against Daniel's hand, just for a moment, before backing up again and pointing toward the door with a low, restless whine. That confirmed it. Rex wasn't asking. He was begging. Daniel stood slowly, watching Rex struggle to stay upright. Any other dog would have collapsed by now. But this was Rex, trained for years to push past pain if a life depended on it. Daniel swallowed hard. If Rex had traveled miles through a blizzard in this condition, then whatever, or whoever, was out there was in urgent danger. Rex nudged the doorknob once more, his body shaking with cold and adrenaline. Daniel walked to the window and peered into the storm. Nothing was visible except swirling snow and darkness. But strong instincts don't need a clear view. They just need trust. And Daniel trusted Rex more than anything. He grabbed his heavy coat, boots, and flashlight. Rex's tail lifted slightly, weak but hopeful. He knew Daniel understood. The real mission was about to begin. Daniel hesitated for a moment, staring at Rex as the storm howled outside. The urgency in the dog's eyes pulled him back to a time he thought he had left behind. Memories rose uninvited, years of patrols, late-night calls, dangerous missions where he and Rex had stood shoulder to shoulder. Back then, Rex wasn't just a canine partner. He was Daniel's closest companion, the one who understood him without words. Their bond had been built through countless moments of trust, moments where one wrong step could have meant the end for both of them. And even though Rex was retired now, nothing about the way he looked at Daniel had changed. Daniel remembered their first mission together. A missing child, a panicked mother, and a forest thick with darkness. Officers searched for hours, but it was Rex who found the little girl buried under fallen branches. Daniel remembered how Rex refused to leave her side until help arrived. That same determination, the same fire, was burning in Rex's eyes tonight. The dog wasn't acting out of fear or confusion. He was acting out of duty, out of instinct, out of loyalty so deep that even retirement hadn't erased it. Another memory surfaced, one he rarely spoke about. A warehouse raid gone wrong, gunfire erupting from every direction. Daniel had been pinned down, breath shaking, certain he wouldn't make it out. But Rex had charged in front of him, taking the lead, pushing through danger with bravery no human could match. They survived that night because Rex never hesitated. He never doubted Daniel. And Daniel vowed he would never doubt Rex in return. That promise echoed inside him now as he watched the dog limp restlessly toward the door again, refusing to rest. A soft whine snapped Daniel back to the present. Rex's body trembled from exhaustion, but his eyes remained fierce, locked onto Daniel's every move. The message was unmistakable. Someone out there needs help. The storm, the distance, the danger, it all meant nothing to Rex. He had pushed himself to his limit to reach Daniel, trusting that his partner would understand. And Daniel did. A bond like theirs didn't fade. It didn't break. It only grew stronger with every life they saved together. Daniel took a deep breath, tightening the straps of his coat. If Rex was willing to face the blizzard again in his condition, then whatever they were about to find was serious. Maybe life-threatening. Maybe worse. But Daniel wasn't turning back. Not tonight. Not when the dog who once saved him was asking him to save someone else. He opened the door. Rex stepped forward without hesitation. Their mission had begun again. The moment Daniel opened the door, a wall of freezing wind slammed into him, stinging his face and stealing his breath. Snow whipped across the porch in violent swirls, erasing everything beyond a few feet. Rex took one shaky step forward, then another, his body trembling, but his determination unbroken. Daniel tightened his grip on the flashlight and followed, pulling the cabin door shut behind him. The sudden darkness outside felt heavy, suffocating, and far more dangerous than he expected. But Rex didn't hesitate. He pushed through the deep snow, leaving a trail of uneven prints behind him. Daniel stayed close, fighting the storm with every step. His boots sank into the snow, slowing him down, while Rex, despite his injuries, moved with purpose. The dog's nose stayed low, sniffing through the icy air, searching for the scent that had brought him here. Daniel watched him closely. Even weakened, Rex was operating on instinct, the same instinct that saved countless lives during their years together. But something felt different tonight. Rex wasn't tracking a suspect. He wasn't responding to a command. He was following something far more urgent, something that terrified even him. Visibility dropped as the wind roared louder. Trees blurred in the white chaos, their branches bending under the weight of the storm. Daniel raised his flashlight, but the beam died before it reached 5 steps ahead. "Rex," he shouted over the storm. The dog paused just long enough to make sure Daniel was still behind him, then continued deeper into the blizzard. A small flicker of fear grew inside Daniel. If Rex collapsed out here, Daniel wasn't sure he could carry him back to safety. But turning around wasn't an option. Not when Rex had come all this way to find him. Minutes felt like hours as they trudged through the woods. The cold bit through Daniel's coat, numbing his fingers and face. Rex stumbled once, dropping briefly to his knees. Daniel rushed forward, placing a steadying hand on his back. "Easy, boy. I'm right here." Rex forced himself up again, shaking off the snow before pressing forward with renewed urgency. Daniel's heart tightened. Whatever they were approaching, Rex knew time was running out. Then, through the roar of the wind, Daniel noticed something unusual. Rex had lifted his head, ears pointed forward, body tense. He had caught a scent, a strong one. Daniel's breath hitched. They were close. Rex pushed ahead, faster now, ignoring the pain in his legs. Daniel followed, bracing himself. Something was waiting for them in the storm. Rex suddenly stopped, his body freezing in place as if the storm itself had paused around him. Daniel lowered his flashlight, tracing the dog's line of sight. At first, all he saw was white, endless white. Then the beam caught something darker beneath the snow. Daniel crouched down, brushing aside a thick layer of ice until a set of footprints appeared. Human footprints. Fresh ones. They staggered in uneven patterns, wavering left and right, as if whoever made them had been injured or struggling to stay upright. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. No one should be out here in a storm like this unless they had no choice. Rex sniffed the ground intensely, his nose pressing into the snow as he followed the tracks. A sudden low growl rumbled in his throat. Daniel leaned closer to examine the trail, and his eyes widened. Drops of blood stained the snow, not from an animal, but from a human. The crimson spots stood out sharply against the white, leading deeper into the woods. Daniel felt a chill heavier than the winter air settle into his chest. Someone out here was hurt, badly hurt, and Rex had come all this way because he knew Daniel was the only one who would follow. Daniel straightened slowly, scanning the path ahead. The storm howled, but the footprints told a clear story. Someone had been running, then stumbling, then dragging their feet as if they were losing strength. The trail curved sharply toward the darker part of the forest, where the trees grew closer together. Rex pulled forward, ignoring his own fatigue, driven by an urgency Daniel had never seen in him. "All right, boy, lead the way," Daniel whispered, tightening his coat and stepping into the deepening snow. As they followed the trail, Daniel noticed something alarming. The footprints were joined by another set. Smaller, lighter, almost like a child's. His breath caught. A second person had been with the injured individual, and the smaller prints zigzagged as if their owner had been frightened or freezing. The sight twisted Daniel's stomach. This wasn't just a stranded hiker or a lost driver. This had the signs of something far more serious, maybe a crime, maybe an escape, maybe a kidnapping. Rex suddenly barked, not loud, but sharp, drawing Daniel's eyes to a broken tree branch smeared with blood. Whoever passed through here had collided with it, leaving behind a grim reminder of their condition. Snowflakes landed softly on the blood before melting into it, slowly erasing the trail. Daniel felt the urgency sharpen. They were running out of time. Rex pushed ahead, nose locked onto the scent. Daniel followed, bracing himself. Whatever they were approaching would change everything. The deeper Rex led him into the storm. The louder the wind seemed to roar, as if warning them to turn back. Daniel pushed forward anyway, relying on the dog's instincts more than his own sight. Suddenly Rex halted again, ears perked, tail stiff. Daniel raised his flashlight, sweeping it across the swirling snow. A faint glint caught his eye, a metallic shine buried under the weight of the storm. Daniel moved closer, brushing away layers of ice until a familiar emblem appeared. His breath hitched. It was the side of a police patrol vehicle. Half buried in snow, the SUV lay on its side, windshield cracked, emergency lights dead. Fresh dents scarred the metal, and deep scratches marked where the vehicle had skidded before flipping. Daniel's stomach tightened. This wasn't a simple accident. The angle, the damage, the location, none of it made sense. Rex whined softly, circling the vehicle with urgency, sniffing every surface as if searching for someone he knew. Daniel stepped back and shined his light on the door. The number on the panel made his heart sink. He recognized it immediately. This was Officer Lewis's unit. A young Officer Daniel had personally trained. Cold dread settled into Daniel's chest. He knelt beside the front door, gripping the frozen handle. It was bent outward, forced open from the inside. Someone had escaped or been dragged out. Snow around the vehicle was disturbed, footprints scattered in chaotic patterns. Daniel followed the marks with his eyes, realizing they matched the earlier tracks. One adult, one child. His pulse quickened. Why had Lewis been transporting a child in a storm like this? And where was he now? Rex suddenly pressed his nose against the shattered window, letting out a low, trembling howl. Daniel crawled closer and shined his flashlight inside. The interior was a mess, blood on the dashboard, papers scattered, radio wires ripped out. A single glove lay on the passenger seat, stiff with frozen blood. Daniel swallowed hard. This wasn't an accident. This was a struggle. He climbed onto the side of the SUV, bracing himself against the icy metal as he peered deeper inside. "Lewis!" he shouted, voice carried away by the wind. No answer. The silence felt heavier than the storm. Rex barked sharply, calling Daniel's attention to the trail leading away from the crash site. The footprints continued, deeper into the woods, staggered, desperate. Daniel's breath trembled. Lewis had survived the crash, but someone else had taken control of what happened next. Rex pushed forward, nose pressed to the ground. Daniel followed. The real danger was just ahead. Rex moved ahead with sudden intensity, his weakened body pushing through the snow, as if driven by something he could no longer hide. Daniel tightened his grip on the flashlight and followed closely. The footprints became more erratic, dragging marks, deeper impressions, signs of someone barely staying conscious. The storm grew harsher, swallowing sounds and visibility, turning the world into a blur of white. Daniel's breath fogged in the air as he pushed forward, each step heavier than the last. Then, just as he lifted his foot again, he heard something faint, a sound so soft he almost mistook it for the wind. He stopped instantly, holding his breath. There it was again, a weak, muffled whimper drifting through the storm. "Rex, did you hear that?" Daniel whispered. Rex's ears shot up, and he bolted toward the sound. Daniel followed fast as the whimper grew clearer. They came upon a fallen tree, half buried in snow. Rex began digging furiously near the trunk, snow flying behind him in frantic bursts. Daniel dropped to his knees and helped sweep the snow aside. Beneath the thick layer of ice, a dark sleeve appeared. Then a trembling hand. Daniel's heart jolted. He cleared more snow until the face of a young officer emerged, pale and half-frozen, barely clinging to consciousness. "Lewis!" Daniel shouted, pulling the officer upright. Officer Lewis's lips were blue, his breaths shallow. He blinked slowly, recognizing Daniel with effort. "'Es, sir," he whispered, voice cracking. Why you came?" Daniel pressed a hand against his shoulder. "Stay with me. What happened? Who did this?" Lewis coughed weakly, pain twisting his expression. It wasn't an accident. They were waiting, forced us off the road." His eyes flickered to the darkness behind Daniel, fear tightening his jaw. "They took her, the little girl. Please find her." Daniel felt a chill deeper than the winter air crawl up his spine. A child. Out here. In this storm. Taken by the same people who ambushed Lewis. He shouted for Rex, but the dog was already ahead, sniffing the wind with renewed urgency. Rex wasn't waiting. He knew the girl was still out there, and running out of time. Daniel reached for his radio, but the signal was dead. He removed his coat and wrapped it around Lewis. "Hold on. Backup is coming," he said, even though he wasn't sure how soon help would arrive. Lewis nodded weakly, leaning into the warmth, breath trembling. Rex barked sharply in the distance, the same bark he used when he found someone alive. Daniel stood. A new fear gripped him. If Rex was calling now, the girl had to be close, and she might not have much time left. Rex's bark cut through the storm like a warning siren, sharp enough to pull Daniel back to his feet instantly. The dog stood a few yards ahead, body stiff, tail low, nose buried in the snow, as he traced a scent only he could understand. Daniel gave one last look at Officer Lewis, slumped safely against the fallen tree, wrapped in Daniel's coat. "Hold on," he whispered. "I'll bring her back." Lewis managed a faint nod. Then Daniel turned and hurried toward Rex, the cold slicing through him with every step. Rex took off the moment Daniel approached, limping but determined, his tracks carving a clear line through the blizzard. Daniel followed closely, trying to keep the flashlight beam steady as the ground dipped and rose beneath layers of ice. The storm screamed louder now, as if trying to drown out any hope of finding the child alive. But Rex was moving with purpose, faster, more focused, like he had locked onto something unmistakable. Daniel's heart pounded. He had seen this behavior before on search missions. It meant one thing. Rex had found the girl's scent. The dog led him down a narrow slope where snow had gathered in dangerous folds. Daniel struggled to keep his footing, grabbing branches to stay upright. Rex kept glancing back, making sure Daniel was still with him, then pushing forward with renewed energy. Despite his injuries, Rex's instincts were sharper than ever. He knew the girl was alive. He knew she needed them. And he knew the storm was running out of mercy. Suddenly Rex stopped again, head lifting sharply. A sound carried through the wind, faint, broken, almost swallowed by the storm. Daniel held his breath and listened. At first, he heard nothing. Then it came again. A weak sob. A child's sob. His heart tightened painfully. "We're coming," he shouted, hoping the girl could hear him. Rex responded with a deep, urgent bark, then charged through a cluster of trees toward the sound. Daniel pushed through the branches and followed Rex into a narrow clearing. Snow covered everything except a thin trail of footprints, the same small ones he'd seen earlier. They staggered toward a darker patch of forest. Rex sniffed one print, then another, before letting out a distressed whine and bolting toward the right. Daniel hurried behind him, the weight of fear settling into his chest. Whoever had taken the girl was moving fast. But Rex was faster. The storm was fierce, the forest unforgiving, but neither mattered now. Rex had made up his mind. They were getting the girl back. Alive. Rex pushed ahead with a sudden burst of energy, his weakened legs moving faster than before. Daniel followed, lungs burning from the cold as branches whipped against his coat. The storm grew darker, heavier, almost suffocating. Then, through the swirling snow, a faint glow appeared, a tiny flicker of orange in the distance. Daniel narrowed his eyes. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't a reflection. It was firelight. Someone had built a flame in the middle of the woods. Rex slowed, lowering his body, ears pinned back. It wasn't just fear. It was caution. Daniel felt his pulse rise. Whoever had taken the girl, they were close. As they moved nearer, a structure emerged from the shadows, a small, weather-beaten cabin half hidden behind thick pines. Its roof sagged under heavy snow, and smoke curled weakly from a rusty chimney. The windows were boarded from the outside, except for one narrow slit glowing with the flicker of a lantern. The place looked abandoned, forgotten, the kind of cabin no one visited willingly. But tonight, someone was inside, and they didn't want to be found. Rex crept forward, nose twitching, tail lowered, muscles tense. Daniel gripped his flashlight tighter, stepping quietly beside him. A sudden noise broke through the wind, a sharp thud from inside the cabin. Daniel froze. Then came a muffled cry, so faint it barely reached his ears. But Rex heard it clearly. He jolted forward, scratching at the cabin's door, barking with desperation and anger. Daniel rushed to his side, pressing an ear against the wood. There it was again, a small, frightened whimper. The girl was inside. "Hang on," Daniel shouted, his voice cracking through the storm. The cabin fell silent for a moment, as if whoever was inside had heard him. Daniel scanned the perimeter quickly. Footprints led to the back of the cabin, adult-sized, heavy, moving fast. Someone had just been here. Someone was coming back. The thought tightened Daniel's chest. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before whoever took the girl returned. Rex paced anxiously, scratching deep grooves into the door as if he could break it down himself. Daniel tried the handle. It didn't budge. Locked. Secured. Reinforced from the inside. He stepped back, breath shaking. He couldn't waste time searching for another way in. The girl's cries were growing weaker. Rex's urgency was growing stronger. Daniel met the dog's eyes, and in that split second, an understanding passed between them. They had done this before: danger, risk, rescue. "All right, boy," Daniel whispered. "We're going in." The storm roared around them. The real confrontation was moments away. Daniel stepped back from the door, bracing himself against the icy ground. With one solid kick, the weakened wood splintered near the lock. A second forceful strike sent the door cracking inward, swinging open with a loud groan. Rex darted inside first, nose low, ready for anything. Daniel followed with the flashlight raised, scanning the dim, cramped space. The air inside was colder than expected, carrying the scent of smoke, damp wood, and fear. Shadows clung to every corner, making the room feel narrower, almost suffocating. Then his beam stopped on a small shape in the back corner of the cabin. A young girl, no older than 8, sat curled against the wall, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Duct tape covered her wrists, and a torn blanket hung loosely over her shoulders. Her cheeks were red from crying, eyes wide, filled with terror. The moment the light touched her, she flinched, trembling violently. Rex moved slowly toward her, lowering his body, tail still, not wanting to scare her further. Daniel crouched beside the dog, speaking softly. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe now. We're here to help." The girl blinked, breath shaking in short bursts, trying to understand whether the nightmare was finally ending. Rex inched closer and gently nudged her hand with his nose. The girl's lips quivered. She reached out hesitantly, touching Rex's fur as if grounding herself in something real. "Don't let them come back," she whispered. Daniel leaned in. Who did this to you?" Her eyes darted to the door, then to the boarded window. She swallowed hard. "The men, they said they'd be back before the fire goes out." Daniel glanced at the lantern flickering weakly in the corner. The flame was shrinking. Time was running out. He quickly pulled a pocket knife and cut the tape from her wrists. The girl winced, but didn't pull away. Once free, she clung tightly to Rex's neck, burying her face in his fur. Daniel felt his pulse rising. If the kidnappers were returning, he needed to move fast. "We're getting you out of here," he said firmly. "But you have to stay close to me." The girl nodded, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Just as Daniel lifted her into his arms, Rex suddenly growled, a low, deep rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Daniel froze. Rex's ears were pointed toward the window slit, his stare locked on the darkness outside. Someone was out there, watching, approaching. Daniel tightened his grip around the child and stepped back. The cabin had become a trap, and they were no longer alone. Rex's growl deepened, vibrating through the wooden floor as he positioned himself between Daniel and the door. Daniel slowly moved the girl behind him, his pulse hammering against his ribs. Outside, faint crunching sounds grew louder, heavy boots pressing into snow, approaching with deliberate steps. The storm masked their voices, but not their presence. Whoever these men were, they were confident enough to return in the middle of a blizzard. Rex lowered his body, muscles tight despite his injuries, eyes fixed on the doorway. Daniel tightened his grip on the flashlight, wishing he had brought more than just instinct and courage. A shadow moved past the window slit. Then another. Daniel inhaled sharply. There were at least two of them. The door, barely hanging from Daniel's earlier kick, creaked as someone pushed against it. A hushed voice whispered from outside, "Lights are still on there inside." The door swung open slowly, revealing two figures bundled in dark winter gear, their faces hidden behind masks. One carried a flashlight, the other a hunting rifle glinting in the dim cabin light. The taller man stepped forward, his tone cold. "You shouldn't have come here." Daniel stood firm, keeping the girl behind him. Rex let out another warning growl, his tail rigid, ready to strike despite the trembling in his legs. The rifleman aimed directly at Daniel. "Move away from the girl." Daniel lifted his free hand, keeping his voice steady. "She's coming with us. The police know where you are." It was a bluff, but one he had to make. The shorter man scoffed. "Police can't even reach this mountain right now. You're alone." Daniel's jaw tightened. He needed to protect the girl, but charging two armed men was suicide. Rex shifted slightly, eyes narrowing. Daniel recognized the stance. Rex had made up his mind. If these men tried anything, he would attack. The rifleman took a step closer. "Last chance. Hand her over." Daniel shook his head. "Not happening." For a split second, everything went silent. The storm, the wind, even Daniel's heartbeat. Then the rifleman jerked the barrel upward. Before he could fire, Rex exploded forward with a furious snarl, launching himself at the man's arm. The shot went wild, shattering a lantern and plunging the cabin into flickering shadows. The second man lunged toward Daniel, but Daniel swung his flashlight hard, smashing it across the attacker's mask. The man stumbled, slipping on the icy floor. The girl screamed, clinging to the wall as chaos erupted around her. Flames from the broken lantern licked at the floorboards. Gunfire, shadows, panic. The storm outside wasn't the only danger now. The real fight had begun. The gunshot's echo had barely faded when Rex clamped down on the rifleman's arm, teeth sinking deep into the thick winter coat. The man screamed, stumbling backward as the rifle slipped from his hands and skidded across the cabin floor. Rex held on with every ounce of strength he had left, his injured body shaking, but his grip unbroken. Daniel saw his opening. He shoved the second attacker away, sending him crashing into a broken chair. The cabin flickered with light as the spilled lantern flames spread across the floorboards, smoke rising into the air. Time was running out fast. The rifleman swung his arm violently, desperately trying to throw Rex off. "Get this dog off me," he shouted. Rex refused to loosen his grip. Daniel lunged forward, grabbing the man's coat and driving him against the wall. The rifleman's mask slipped, revealing a face covered in panic and frostburn. Daniel punched him once in the jaw, the force enough to make the man collapse to his knees. Rex finally released him and staggered back, panting heavily, his legs trembling from exhaustion. Before Daniel could check on Rex, the second attacker recovered and charged from behind with a broken piece of wood. Daniel turned just in time, blocking the swing with his forearm. Pain shot up his arm, but he didn't stop. He kicked the man hard in the stomach. The attacker stumbled backward, straight toward the growing flames. He slipped on the slick floor and fell, the wood flying from his hand as he hit the ground with a thud. Daniel seized the moment, pinning him down with his knee and yanking off his mask. "You're done," Daniel growled. The man hissed back, voice shaking. "You won't make it out of this storm alive." Daniel grabbed a loose rope from the table and tied his hands before he could resist again. Then he turned to the rifleman, who was struggling weakly near the wall. Rex limped toward him, lips curled, giving the man no chance to move. Daniel tied him as well, pulling the knots tight. Smoke thickened around them as the fire crept dangerously close to the cabin walls. Daniel scooped the terrified girl into his arms. "Stay close," he told Rex. The dog managed a small bark, forcing himself upright despite the pain. His eyes glowed with determination. He wasn't leaving until everyone was safe. The flames spread fast, crackling up the wooden beams. Daniel kicked the door open. Snow and icy wind blasted into the cabin. "Rex, let's go." The dog followed without hesitation. They escaped into the storm just as the cabin behind them erupted in fire. The moment Daniel stepped outside, the storm swallowed them whole. Icy wind slammed into his face, nearly knocking him off balance as he held the girl tightly against his chest. Snow whipped around them in dangerous spirals, erasing their footprints as fast as they made them. Rex staggered beside him, breathing hard, each step a painful effort. The burning cabin behind them lit the storm in angry orange flashes, its crackling collapse echoing through the trees. Daniel didn't dare look back. The kidnappers were tied up, but the fire would draw attention, and he needed to get the girl and Rex to safety before the storm took its final toll. He scanned the forest for any sign of direction, but everything looked the same. White, cold, endless. Daniel forced himself forward, keeping Lewis's last known position in mind. "Rex, find him," he shouted over the wind. Rex lifted his head, nostrils flaring despite his exhaustion. After a moment, he turned sharply to the left and began limping through the snow. Daniel followed, trusting Rex's instincts more than his own fading sense of direction. Every step felt heavier. The girl's small arms clung to him, her trembling body reminding him that he couldn't afford to slow down. Minutes passed like hours. Daniel's legs burned, his vision blurred, and the cold seeped into his bones. Just as doubt began creeping in, Rex let out a weak bark and pushed ahead. Daniel squinted through the blizzard, and there, barely visible under a fallen tree, was Officer Lewis. He lay curled where Daniel had left him, Daniel's coat pulled tightly around his shaking body. Relief washed over Daniel. "Lewis, we've got her," he shouted, kneeling beside him. Lewis opened his eyes weakly, a small, pained smile forming. Thank God," he whispered. Daniel lowered the girl beside him and checked Lewis's pulse. It was faint, but steady. He needed warmth. He needed help. And they were running out of both. Daniel reached for his radio again, and this time the static gave way to a faint signal. Backup was finally within range. "This is Hayes. I've located the victims. We need medical evacuation immediately." His voice cracked with urgency. Rex collapsed beside him, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Daniel placed a hand on his neck. "Stay with me, buddy, just a little longer." The dog lifted his eyes, tired but faithful as ever. In the distance, faint sirens began cutting through the storm, a sound Daniel had never been so grateful to hear. Help was coming, and they were finally going home. The rescue team rushed in with snowmobiles and medical gear, their headlights slicing through the fading storm. Paramedics lifted Lewis carefully onto a stretcher, covering him with thermal blankets as they checked his vitals. Another medic wrapped the young girl tightly, whispering reassuring words as she clung to Daniel's sleeve. But Daniel's eyes were fixed on Rex, who lay motionless beside the fallen tree. His breaths were shallow, fogging the air in weak, uneven puffs. When the paramedic knelt to examine him, Daniel felt his stomach twist. He had seen that expression on medics before, worried, uncertain, preparing bad news. "His temperature is dangerously low," the medic said, "and he's exhausted severely." Daniel crouched beside Rex, gently lifting the dog's head into his lap. Snow clung to Rex's fur, but Daniel could feel the heat draining from his body. "Come on, buddy," Daniel whispered, brushing ice from Rex's muzzle. "Hold on for me." Rex's eyes fluttered open for a moment, meeting Daniel's gaze with a faint, tired flicker of recognition. His tail moved once, slow, weak, then fell still again. Daniel swallowed hard, pushing down the lump rising in his throat. The medic placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "We need to get him to the animal hospital immediately. If we wait, he won't make it." Daniel nodded, his jaw tightening. He helped lift Rex onto a sled-like stretcher, tucking a thermal blanket around him. As the snowmobile roared to life, Daniel climbed on behind the medic, keeping one hand on Rex the entire ride down the mountain. The storm had eased, but the cold remained merciless. Daniel couldn't stop replaying the night in his mind. Rex arriving at his cabin, Rex fighting through pain, Rex saving the girl without hesitation. Every memory twisted deeper, fueling a fear Daniel hadn't felt in years. When they finally reached the hospital, Daniel carried Rex inside himself. The veterinary team rushed forward, taking the stretcher from his arms. "We'll do everything we can," the doctor said before disappearing behind swinging doors. Daniel stood frozen in the hallway, snow melting off his coat, heart pounding in his ears. Minutes passed like hours. The weight of everything, Lewis's ambush, the kidnapped girl, the burning cabin, settled heavily on him. But nothing pressed harder than the thought of losing Rex. He sank into a chair, elbows on his knees, hands covering his face. "You can't leave me now," he whispered into the empty hallway. "Not after everything." For the first time all night, Daniel felt helpless. All he could do now was wait, and pray Rex's strength hadn't run out. Daniel waited in the hallway, staring at the double doors that separated him from Rex. Every second felt heavier than the last. Doctors and nurses rushed past, voices echoing faintly, but Daniel heard none of it. All he could think about was the dog who had crawled through a blizzard, bleeding and half frozen, just to bring him help. A dog who had risked everything, for him, for Lewis, for the child. Daniel's hands trembled as he clasped them together. "Please," he whispered, "don't let this be the end." The memory of Rex collapsing in the snow replayed again and again, making his chest tighten painfully. At last, the doors swung open. A veterinarian stepped out, removing her gloves with a tired sigh. Daniel stood instantly, heart pounding. She offered a small, gentle smile. "He's stable," she said. It was close, very close. But he pulled through. Daniel exhaled sharply, a wave of relief crashing through him, so strong he had to steady himself against the wall. The doctor continued, "He's weak and needs time, but he's responding well to treatment. You can see him now, just for a moment." Daniel nodded, unable to speak as gratitude knotted in his throat. He pushed the door open quietly. Inside, Rex lay on a soft blanket, hooked to warm fore fluids, his breathing slow but steady. The moment Rex sensed him, his eyes flickered open. They weren't strong, but they were alive, full of the same loyalty Daniel had known for years. Daniel knelt beside him, placing a hand gently on his fur. "You did it, buddy," he whispered. "You saved them all." Rex's tail thumped once against the blanket, a weak but undeniable sign that he recognized Daniel's voice. That single movement brought tears to Daniel's eyes. A soft knock sounded behind him. Daniel turned as the young girl stepped inside, wrapped in a hospital blanket, her small hand held by a nurse. She approached slowly, eyes fixed on Rex. "Is he okay?" she asked in a timid voice. Daniel nodded. "Because of him, you're safe." The girl knelt beside Rex and gently touched his paw. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're my hero." Rex's eyes softened, and his tail moved again, stronger this time. News of the rescue spread quickly. A retired K-9 braving a deadly blizzard. A kidnapped child saved. 2 officers brought home alive. Reporters called it a miracle. Officers called it bravery. But Daniel knew the truth. Rex didn't do it out of duty. He did it out of love. One final act of courage that shocked the entire community. And as Daniel sat beside him, he knew their story wasn't ending. It was beginning again. This story teaches us that true courage isn't always loud or heroic. It often comes from loyalty, love, and the willingness to protect others even when the cost is great. Rex showed that strength is not measured by power, but by heart. Daniel showed that trust built over years never fades. Together, they remind us that every life matters, and that stepping forward in moments of danger can change someone's world forever. We learn that compassion, bravery, and doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, can create miracles. Sometimes heroes walk on two legs, and sometimes on four.